Okay, so Venerable Upekkha, or Ayya Upekkha is also, both of us have grown up as monastics together. We ordained, I became bhikkhunis together 10 years ago at the same time, and been practicing together as well for a long time in Dhammasara. And Venerable comes from time to time to Santi to help us out. So it's really nice to have her here with us. And so we thought it's nice to give a Dhamma teaching today together, like a co-teaching. So I would like to invite Ayya Upekkha to get started with this very beautiful topic proposed by one of our supporters or friends or who's in the group on the middle path. So on to you, and Rebecca.
Okay.
Over to you.
So when Venerable Karunika, we were sitting across each other, looking over our computers as monastics do, and said, "Oh, someone suggested a topic for us, a topic for today on the middle way. What do you think?" So, well, the first thing I thought about was what our doctor said a couple of weeks ago, was that I follow the middle way. I don't eat too many ice creams. I don't eat ice cream every day. I only eat ice cream a couple of times a week because the Buddha taught the middle way. And so I don't have too many ice creams. I have just the right amount of ice cream. That is my middle way. So this is what came to mind, and Venerable Karunika laughed because she had the same problem.
Not about the middle path, but about the ice creams.
So, and I remember, this is like such a, really, my grandfather used to say this as well, the Buddha taught the middle way of not following two extremes. You have to do what is the middle path for you. Don't sleep too much, sleep the right amount. Don't eat too many ice creams. Okay, not ice creams, but eat the right amount of ice creams for you. So this is what I remember growing up at, what people thought the middle way was. It's not having too many indulgences and not being too harsh on yourself either. So I'm wondering how many other people also have this very, lovely idea about the middle way, because what it means is that we don't push ourselves too much. We are not too hard on ourselves, but we don't indulge either. So, I'm wondering.
Don't we redefine our middle way to suit ourselves?
Exactly.
That's what I find myself.
Exactly. Basically, we choose a middle way that is comfortable for us.
Yes.
Basically, so we can have a lovely existence that is just what the Buddha taught, the middle way, where we are comfortable. So, well, this is tragically sorry, but this is not what the Buddha called the middle way. And yes, so the first time the Buddha talked about the middle way was his first discourse to the 5 ascetics. You probably all know about the Dhammacakka Sutta, where the Buddha speaks for the first time to his 5 companions who had been practicing what was common at that time, which was to what was obviously, people believed was the way to enlightenment, was to mortify, torture your body, to eat little, to sleep little, to stand on one leg, eat one grain of rice, to fast. And to this day, actually, there's something in all of us that thinks that this sort of um, if we deny ourselves, then that is a practice, that is the way out of suffering. We'll just um, hurt ourselves a little bit, and then I feel quite holy then. Anyways, so that's who he was speaking to when he first talked about the middle way. And so remembering that audience and remembering that context, the Buddha first introduced this idea of the middle way. And in particular, he was referring to the middle way, which was not following two paths, these two paths which he called extremes. The extreme of torturing yourselves, which is what was a common practice. And the other common practice, which tragically all of us who eat only one ice cream a week fall into, which is the path of finding happiness in the sense world, the world of the five senses, which is where all of us are trying to find happiness, and which is where people at that time were also trying to find happiness. So what the Buddha was talking about when he talked about the middle way is not following these two paths, which is what everybody, most of us, are trying to find happiness in, either in, seeing things beautiful, having a comfortable life, and also of trying to sort of torture our way out of our suffering. So avoiding not going down these two paths, the Buddha said, I teach you the middle way, not the middle of those two paths. But what is defined as he defined as the Noble Eightfold Path. Very specifically, the Noble Eightfold Path. And that Noble Eightfold Path is not the middle of those two paths. It is very specifically the path leading to enlightenment, the path leading to understanding non-self, to understanding the nature of this existence. And
to the ending of suffering.
To the ending of suffering. It's very specific. It's a very specific path, the Noble Eightfold Path. So following those eightfold steps is what is the middle way. Of course, there is a lot to be said about that. In fact, the entire teaching. So okay, then I'll pass on to Venerable Karunika. She can do the rest.
Okay. Okay, because you started, you brought the conversation and clarified the fact that in everybody's pursuit of happiness and peace, we are trying to look for it with me existing with this body and searching for happiness and peace mainly in the body aspects as well, right? Like sensual indulgences. I mean, of course, there is a mind aspect, but related with this me and with my craving, trying to look for something, either in the sensual world or in the ascetic practice. But the Buddha says happiness and peace is found when this me, which is a delusion, is gone. And when the craving comes to an end, because all those two things, which is called Kamasukallikanu Yoga, which is the sensual happiness, looking for the pleasures, is still a wanting, based on wanting, trying to find peace. Attakilamatanu Yoga, also still wanting to do this ascetic practice, still based on me here wanting something and pursuing peace. The Buddha says, both of those, because there is a me and craving, is not leading to the ending of suffering. And those of us who know who has indulged in the sensual world, this is the most common one for most of us. We know we've been there, done that, done so many things. There's no end to it, isn't? Are we happy yet? Are we peaceful yet? Yeah, there is gratification in those sensual pleasures, in pursuing those things. Yet it's never satisfying. They are not satiable. They are unsatiate. There's no end, insatiable, these things. So for the next, we are looking and still suffering, even though there is gratification. So that's why the Buddha said not to follow that line. There is no end to it, and peace cannot be found. What you find, anything, is nothing but more trouble. We also know that, right? The more and more we look in that direction, all what we reap is a lot more a heap of suffering. And of course, the Attakilamatanu Yoga, which is giving torture, is directly a lot of suffering in pursuit of happiness, and really hardly any gratification there. But they hope for something in the next life, which doesn't happen as well. So this is where the Buddha talks about this middle path. But I want to read out something really beautiful that is, which one is it? Yeah, this comes up in Samyutta Nikaya, Connected Discourses, chapter 12, that is on the Nidana Samyutta on causality, sutta number 65, called the city. I'm not going to read the whole sutta, but I want to read out a beautiful extract from it, what the Buddha says about finding the middle way. The Buddha says, suppose bhikkhus, there was a... Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. Suppose bhikkhus, a man wandering through a forest, would see an ancient path, an ancient road traveled upon by people in the past. He would follow it and would see an ancient city, an ancient capital that had been inhabited by people in the past, with parks, groves, ponds, and ramparts, a delightful place. Then the man would inform the king or a royal minister, Sire, know that while wandering through the forest, I saw an ancient path, an ancient road traveled upon by people in the past. I followed it and saw an ancient city, an ancient capital that had been inhabited by people in the past, with parks, groves, ponds, and ramparts, a delightful place. Renovate that city, sire. Then the king or the royal minister would renovate the city, and sometime later that city would become successful and prosperous, well populated, filled with people attained to growth and expansion. So too, bhikkhus, I saw the ancient path, the ancient road traveled by the perfectly enlightened ones of the past, that is, all the previous Buddhas. And what is that ancient path, that ancient road? It is just this noble eightfold path. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, or right stillness. I followed that path, and by doing so, I have directly known aging and death, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading to its cessation. I have directly known birth. I have directly known existence, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the six sense bases, name and form, and consciousness, volitional formations, their origin, their cessation, and the way leading to their cessation. Having directly known them, I have explained them to the bhikkhus, the bhikkhunis, the male lay followers, and the female lay followers. This holy life, bhikkhus, has become successful and prosperous, extended, popular, widespread, well proclaimed among devas and humans. Quite a beautiful, I really like this one about the ancient path. and it's comparison to an ancient city and stuff. But what the Buddha is saying, so he discovered this noble eightfold path, but where does it lead to? It leads to understanding the causality, dependent origination. So this is where before the time of the Buddha, the people went wrong because they did not understand the causality, how things are arise by with condition, right? So there were two extreme views at the time of the Buddha, or before the time of the Buddha as well. And one part of the people thought everything exists and exists forever. That is the eternal view, yeah. And then those are the people who also believe that after you die, either you go to heaven or hell, and then you last there forever. And then there was the other view, the opposite one, that was the annihilist view, and that is thinking that, once there is a sense of self, and once that sense of self is sort of extinguished or annihilated, then everything finishes and there is no existence or non-existence, pretty much. This session is not going to be enough to go into this very deep philosophical kind of thing. It is beyond our time here together, but just to mention that there was these two extreme views, and this is where people were trying to look for ending of suffering. But for all of them, they had the permanent essence, right? The permanent essence, either that lasted forever or a permanent essence that got destroyed. Yeah. So there was that wrong view, wrong understanding, and also having that agency within, there was that craving to end, or craving to end suffering, the craving to look for peace and happiness. So this is where those two views and then these two paths were going wrong. So what the Buddha discovered by following the Noble Eightfold Path is the dependent origination. That was what he awakened to at the night of his awakening. This is one of his knowledges. Yeah, he understood because he asked the question, because all this suffering, yeah, where is this suffering coming from? Yeah, this is the going backwards in this very deep teaching. And this is when he asked the question, where is suffering coming from? He realized the suffering is there because we are born. And where is birth coming from? Birth is coming from because there is existence. Yeah, where did existence come from? Existence come from because we were clinging to things. Yeah, we were desiring things. We were holding on to things. That gives us existence into a certain form of being. And where is the clinging coming from? Clinging is coming from craving. Where did the craving come from? Craving came from feeling. Feeling is coming from contact. Contact is from sense basis, and sense basis goes to name and form, into consciousness, and into the volitional formations, and to ignorance. Now, again, this is a very deep doctrinal teaching, which we have covered at other times, but which we can cover another time. So I'm again not going into detail, but the whole point I'm mentioning it here is to see the dependent nature of the arising of our suffering. So when you see that suffering is causally arisen, yeah, there is a nutriment for the arising of our suffering. And when the cause is taken away, the suffering comes to an end. This is how it is done. Yeah. So part of that is the delusion, the idea that there is somebody here. And another aspect of that is craving. So those are part of the dependent origination. And that is what is causing the suffering in us. Think about it for a moment, right? All of our suffering. And the Buddha says in the second noble truth, the first noble truth is that discovery that there is unsatisfactoriness, or there is suffering in the world. Because for many people, even they are so immersed in suffering, but don't realize I'm suffering. Yeah, this is also true for some people. Only some people wake up and suddenly realize, wow, there is a lot of suffering. Is there something I can do? Yeah, so that is when they start to search. So the second noble truth says the cause for suffering. The cause for suffering is craving. What are these cravings? Craving for the sensual world or the sensual pleasures, craving to exist, or craving to non-exist, that annihilation, yeah, to kill or like destroy an existing essence. So all these three cravings is what is the root of our sufferings. Yeah. So you can just relate to it, reflect back and see how craving brings about all forms of suffering, even starting with not being able to have an ice cream. Even from something small like that into all forms of suffering, right? All subtle forms of sufferings. And then the third noble truth says that very ending of that craving, that is the ending of, that is nibbana, that is enlightenment. So this is how it is done. Because there is a cause, there is a condition. When that is ended, then there is peace. So this is why the two extremes are abandoned and a middle path has been discovered by the Buddha. And also, it is interesting to reflect and see that in other suttas, it's not just only the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, if you want to look at numerical discourses, chapter number 3, sutta number 156, 57, 50, up to 162, you would say that middle path that he discovered in fact includes all of the 37 factors for enlightenment, called 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, starting from the right efforts, the effort to do wholesome and abandon unwholesome, and even the Satipatthana practice, the practice of just mentioned like that. So all of that is also mentioned, because all of those, cultivating all of those, what does it lead to? It leads to understanding the causal, the way how the suffering is coming to be. It is conditionally arisen. So this is what is so beautiful. When you take away the condition, suffering comes to an end. So so this is what is, I hope, is becoming clear what the middle path is. And Venerable Upekkha very beautifully clarified the misconceptions of many of us for a long time, thinking being Buddhists, we are practicing the middle path in this way of, finding that right amount. Well, there is a place for that, but it is not called the middle path. Because there is a way, because, of course, when we are existing, we have a body. This is our old karma, right? So we are already born. And we have to deal with this body and this mind. And we have to give it its conducive conditions, just the right amount only. Otherwise, you go into indulgences. So this is why we still have to eat. We still have to have clothes. We still have to have a place to stay. We still need to have some medicines. These are our basic needs, called four requisites for monastics. And for anybody else also, these are the very basic four things that we need to survive, to look after this body. So in there, of course, in the gradual training and many other places, the Buddha says how to use these things. So in moderation, what is appropriate and what is conducive. So at a time, if you've been doing lots of work, you might need to eat a bit more. At a time when you have not been doing very much, you may not need to eat so much. So even everything, just the very basic and with the right kind of reflection. So for the monastics, for example, the way to eat is not for fun, not for pleasure, not for beautification, all of those, not for fattening, not for all of those, only for the maintenance and nourishment of this body. We eat what is suitable. So if you have any health conditions, eat what is that is suitable, that has been offered. Of course, as monastics, we can't really go and buy, but people sometimes offer, and then you use what is helpful. So there is something like that to find in the right amount of sleep. Even this is coming in the gradual training. So the gradual training, the Buddha talks about these things. So not to sleep too much. The Buddha says not to eat too much, not to socialize too much. Yeah. So it's not too much, but of course you have to eat, you have to sleep. There is time and place where you need to engage with other people. All of that is there. But then you find, but how do you find what is right? Yeah, because this is, I suppose, what the person asked when they wanted this middle path, rather than the Noble Eightfold path is how to sort of manage oneself. And this is what we have been discussing as well. And this is an important, very practical point. While we don't call it the middle path, but this is the right, the gradual training, we can say. I mean, gradual training is part of the middle path, but how do you do it? So like we were discussing, so whatever you do, see when you do that, whether your wholesome states are increasing, unwholesome states are decreasing, then that would be the right amount. But when you do that, if your unwholesome mind states are increasing, wholesome mind states are decreasing, then we have to adjust it. That's either too much or too little. Now, for example, take sleep. I'm sure every one of you would have had a day where you have overslept too much, like many hours, and really indulged in sleep. And how did you feel when you wake up? Actually, you don't feel so well, not energetic. You feel lethargic and lazy because overslept. And of course, most people not sleep enough. Sleep deprivation is very common problem, and of course for many issues in the world, problems and diseases in the world. So lack of sleep, again, you feel tired, not energetic. But there would have been some days that you have woken up at the right time and you got out of bed and got started and you feel really good. You feel really good in the body. You feel really good in the mind. The energy levels are quite balanced. Then you know that's the right amount. Yeah. So the right amount changes depending on, your health, depending on the seasons, depending on the food digestion, depending on your meditation practice, so many things. So when you are on retreat, when you are meditating much, actually you don't need much sleep. Even 4 hours is enough. Sometimes between 4 to 6 hours is more than enough, and you feel very fresh. And other times when you have been busy having to do lots of stuff, then the body may need more sleep, or the body is fighting sickness. So like that, it's hard to tell this is the right amount. And to each individual, it depends. Everybody's constitution is different. So this you need to figure out by constantly investigating. Yeah, you can do the reflect back at least and see how was it? I overslept or underslept, overrate or underrate. Again, difficult to know how much is the right amount straight away. So you have to have awareness as you eat, and awareness about your sleep habits, awareness about many other things. Exercise doesn't come up as a teaching, because at the time of the Buddha, everybody had to walk. There were no cars, there were only horse carts and stuff. Only the rich people had. So vast majority of people, including all the monks and nuns, mostly walked. So they had plenty of exercise. But these days we are couch potatoes, so we sit in front of a computer. So then we also need to know what is the right amount of exercise for the body. Human bodies need that. Yeah, otherwise meditation is hard. Otherwise cultivation of the path is really difficult. So this is, even though not called as the middle path, this is finding what is right, so that the wholesome mind state starts to grow, unwholesome ones go down. Even the meditation goes well, because certain kind of food, when you eat, your digestion is struggling, then okay, this is difficult, then I can't sit so long. I'm a bit more restless. But I mean, certain foods have effects. I don't know, I recently heard, did you know the effect of durian? Not just the smell, not just the gas. Apparently, durian is an aphrodisiac. Yeah. So if you don't know, you know now. Yeah. So certain foods you eat and certain desires will come up. not because of anything else, simply because of the food. But maybe probably a little bit wouldn't do much. But if you really like durian and ate a whole durian and ate over much, of course you can expect you can't go and meditate after that. Yeah. So this is how we become a bit alert and aware and find out if our path, practicing of this Noble Eightfold Path, is important to us. And then, how do I take care of my body? How do I take care of my mind? What is the middle, the right amount for me at that time? Again, with, for the lay people or for us as well, if you're doing that, time on the screen, time on the computer, all of those things, the time that you talk and the time in seclusion, but seclusion is so important. Yeah, the Buddha says the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path, and in fact all of the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the factors for enlightenment, are to be developed based on 4 foundations. What are these 4 foundations? Viveka Nisitang, Viraga Nisitang, Nirodha Nisitang, Vasagga Parinami. So Viveka, yeah, seclusion of the body and seclusion of the mind is very essential. So how do we find our middle way of doing things is what is conducive to finding that seclusion. Do you work overly much or do you work enough? Okay, this is good enough now. And you also need to find the time to go and sit, to be away and stop. Yeah. So this is how we need to. So it's a constant practice, even though that's not the middle way, that is being skillful way of guiding ourselves on the path, finding the conducive way. Because sometimes you see, especially monastics and unfortunately, but maybe lay people too, become very idealistic about the path, yeah, about the monastic life even. And they really give themselves a really hard time. Yeah, try to do things that are difficult and actually end up getting sick. We hear about monastics who have to end up going to double knee surgery, right? Because sitting too much when the body couldn't handle it, or in a way that is not helpful for the body, and all kinds of problems by trying to not becoming aware and doing these things again, doing a little bit attakilamatano kamasukalikan yoga, or some just sleeping overly much, indulging the little bit of ache, the little bit of cold, have to do something. So it's just that. So it's finding that balance. But of course, Ajahn Brahm always says if you have to decide, just err a little bit on the more pleasurable side, not the suffering side, because when the suffering gets too much, then everything else becomes much worse. But not to go too much in this side either, but you need to see, when I do this, what's the result? How is my meditation at the end? Yeah, how do I feel in the body and the mind? And then it's a whole investigation, isn't it? What would you like to add? This is our favorite topic, isn't it? We have many conversations about this.
Years of
Yeah,
conversations
years of conversations.
about
Yeah.
sleeping too much, eating too much, working
Yeah.
too much, sitting in front of the computer too long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like like, it's like such a trap.
Yes.
Such a trap, because we really just want to be comfortable at the end of the day. And we end up, stuck in that sense world because we're just basically trying to keep our bodies comfortable and our lives comfortable and continuing in our existence. So,
and it's getting harder and harder in the modern world as well, isn't it? Because we have so many things on offer available. So it becomes hard because, of course, the defilements are there. And they tell us little stories, right? You got to have just this much. It's actually okay. It's actually the right amount for you. So, we have to tackle our cunning defilements as well. This is the problem in trying to do this. So what we have to do, I suppose, is you just try what seems reasonable. It may be unreasonable, but what you think at the time, or what even the defilements think, try it out, learn from mistakes. Yeah. And they say, okay, mind, you told me do this, I did that. Look
See
what
what
see what happens. So next time I should not do this. I'm not going to fall into that trap. So I suppose, that kind of awareness, that is where the mindfulness and clear comprehension, sati and sampajanya is so very helpful. Yeah. Because if you don't have that awareness, you just get trapped and go for years without realizing. I mean, there are traps of meditation stages, not the right way, yeah? Because people sometimes, without putting in the right foundations, without doing in the right way, they just sit down, they let go. But what they let go of their mindfulness and everything, and they try to shut down everything. A way of pain, overcoming suffering, like asanya, not perceiving, yeah,
Basically
not
falling asleep.
yeah, falling asleep or shutting down, yeah. Even sometimes the awareness is there, but they're shutting down, not perceiving, asanya. So doing that, you come into a place that is like, it seems like no suffering is there because you're not perceiving anything, and you feel like comfortable and nice. But what is really important to understand, this is what the Buddha says about suffering, is to be understood. Not suffering is to be destroyed in that way. Suffering is to be understood. And that is when the suffering comes to an end. Yeah? Parinyeya. Yeah? Parinyeya. Not to, so to remember that we need to have that awareness. So suffering is to be faced sometimes, and that is when you will have the insights. Yeah, not running away and pushing it aside. That will be again like nihilistic attitudes or views of doing meditation. But the thing is, sometimes if you don't wake up, if you don't do the reflection, that pacha vekkana, yeah, that is why every time we do a guided meditation, we have that habit of how was it? How do I feel now? How did the meditation go? Reflecting back, looking back, how did things happen? And then you can see whether you meditated in the right way or the wrong way, or whether you got into some form of traps, because these are also nice, pleasurable, cool places where we like to go and spend hours. But awakening is not possible in these places, but they become also indulgences in some ways. So everywhere, not just in the sensual world, but even in our meditative world, we have to find and not get trapped and not tell our defilements, telling, oh, this is nice, this is good, this is the right way, but constantly bringing up right view and then reflecting back and see whether is this in line with what the Buddha says, is my overall suffering ending, or does all that suffering comes back when I come back of meditation? Yeah, is insights coming up in my mind? Because this is important. Of course, deep insights come after deep meditation. But even after you become, even the hindrances go down a certain degree, small insights still come up, and that's still helpful. Yeah, that still brings peace. So this is how we also guide ourselves in our meditation, finding that middle way of doing the meditation, not the middle path, but middle way of finding how to navigate through our meditation, navigate through our spiritual journey, navigate through life pretty much in a right way. What's the right thing? Because we always have a choice, but we forget that we have a choice. And our habits kick in, and with the habits usually are rooted in our defilements, our sense of self and craving, and then we always end up mostly make up and doing things that are unskillful, harmful, not useful. So to remember that we have a choice every moment, as we receive the world, as we hold the world, as we respond to the world. So make it a response, not a reaction. Reactions are habitual, based for eons in defilements. So this is really, really interesting. And since we have a little bit of time, I will also mention that this very interesting sutta, which one is it now? Okay. So this is from, again, Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 42, sutta number 12, very interesting one, called Rasya. So then Rasya, the headman, approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat to one side, and said to him, Venerable Sir, I have heard the ascetic Gautama criticizes all austerity. He categorically blames and reviles any ascetic who leads a rough life. Do those who speak thus, Venerable Sir, state what has been said by the Blessed One and not misrepresent him with what is contrary to fact? Do they explain in accordance with the Dhamma so that no reasonable consequence of their assertion would be open to criticism? Then the Buddha replies, those who speak thus, headman, do not state what has been said by me, but misrepresent me with untruth and falsehood. So this is where, because the Buddha is known to talk about the middle path and say not to go in the way of the indulging in the senses or to go into the austerity. So that is why this person is asking, do you sort of, what did he say? Categorically blame and revile any ascetic who leads a rough life. So it's a really beautiful sutta here. And the Buddha talks about three different kind of people. I'm not going to go in, it's a very long sutta, but in summary, the Buddha says there are some people who goes into in search of or indulgence of sensual pleasure. But in order to get that, they get money and wealth unlawfully. And others get lawfully, and some others get both lawfully and unlawfully. So he talks about three groups of people there how they get the money. And then again, with each one of those group, he talks about how do they do with that money. Some people, even they go in search of the sensual pleasure, they actually don't enjoy it. Yeah, we know of these people. Yeah, they're constantly searching, but they're not actually enjoying it. And then he also talks with whether they are going to share and do some merit with what they have gained. And also he talks about whether they become peaceful, I suppose. Is it? And do not, yeah. Does not make himself happy. Yeah. Yeah. Nor does it share and does not do meritorious deeds. So, and then he says and also another category where the wealth, some do all of those things. They might enjoy it, they might share it, do meritorious acts, but they live attached to their wealth, who are indulging in the sensual pleasures. But there is another group of people, they may be seen to have, partaking the sensual pleasures, but they stay unattached to these sensual pleasures and to the wealth. And they, even though they partake of these sensual pleasures, they see the arising, the passing away, and also they understand the escape from that. So if somebody lives like that, then there is no problem, because sometimes even the Buddha has been invited to lunch at the king's palace, and he would eat all those royal food, being given very nice things. So you could see that he did not refuse. And some people blame the Buddha, saying, look, the Buddha is, eating all this nice food, wearing nice robes, sometimes even living in some of the monasteries later on were very nicely built and made. So it looked like that, some of the monastics were living very luxurious lives. But the Buddha did not disparage that. The Buddha said, if even they partake of what has been given, if they partake understanding, it's arising, passing away, and also not attached to it, not holding on to it, not infatuated by it, but rather with a mind liberated, mind released, there is no problem in taking that. So this is also important to remember. And also the Buddha says also when it comes to the people who are practicing very ascetic practices, it is in this sutta. You can read it up yourself. It's a long sutta. So even with the ascetics, the Buddha says some of them, they just give so much torture and torment to their body and mind as well, I suppose. And then, what do they reap? Yeah. Uh, do they get any a peaceful state? Do they get into any kinds of insights? Yeah. So as a result of that, if they get any kind of pleasurable, wholesome state, and if they get into some insights, the Buddha praised them. But he still sort of says that still that ascetic practice that's giving torture to the body is not praised by the Buddha. It's not necessary because it's not the body that gets enlightened, it's the mind that gets enlightened, right? So this is an important understanding. So this is important to remember. And then the last part of this sutta, the Buddha says, our suffering comes from greed, hatred, and delusion, raga, dosa, moha. Yeah, when these things are there, that is the root cause of our suffering. When these are abandoned, when these are given up, when they are gone, the suffering comes to an end. And how does that happen? That happens through following the Noble Eightfold Path, and developing the 37 enlightenment factors. Any whichever way you want to look at it, it is cultivating the path given by the Buddha. That is where the suffering comes to an end. So quite interesting and important to again reinforce into ourselves, not to sort of disparage people by just looking and seeing, oh, they're indulging or they're torturing. We don't know, right? So not to go around, we don't know how they're cultivating. Maybe they are fully enlightened, like at the time of the Buddha, Arahant Mahakassapa lived quite a austere life. He only wore rag robes, slept under the foot of a tree, always lived with alms food, and practiced all those things, in a very simple way. Not gone into the austerities, but when you looked at the other monks who lived in the monasteries, he lived quite austere kind of life, but he was fully enlightened in the mind. So he didn't do those to get enlightened. He didn't follow a path of giving torture to the body to get enlightened. He followed the Noble Eightfold Path and got enlightened, but he decided to live a very simple life, which seemed like a little bit difficult, but he didn't, disparage as long as you are practicing in the mind, and if that is right condition for you. Because for some people, a bit of that may be the right one. Too much indulgence might make you a bit more lethargic, or your energy levels may not be good. And what may seem like austere practice for one may be the right kind of amount for them. So that is why the Buddha didn't go around disparaging and reviling and, blaming people who did this practice. But the Buddha just said that the middle path is to be practiced if you want to end suffering. So that's also really good to put into mind, because as Buddhists, it's also good for us not to sort of look down upon, disparage people, even, compare and start to sort of what you call judge. Who are we to judge other people? It's not our business. It's for our own understanding. What is the right amount for me? How am I practicing the Noble Eightfold Path? And this is where it is powerful. So the last thing I want to say, just to make things clear about this middle path and the causality, the causal nature of arising of suffering. So suffering is a form of feeling, right? It's both mental and physical feeling. Mostly the mental feeling is what we're talking about. So the feeling, how does feeling come about? Feeling comes about with contact, right? So for example, so your ear contacts some sound and you hear something being said. And based on what you hear, sometimes sadness might come up, a painful feeling comes up. But that is there only while the hearing is there or while the mental contact about what you heard is there. So the mind can also remember what you heard and think about it. Then the mind contacts that incident again, that experience of hearing. But only as long as the contact is there, the suffering, the painful feeling is there. When the contact changes, the contact ends, that feeling ends. So this is what the Buddha says in essence. This is how suffering comes to an end. This is just a small bit to show it doesn't come from searching, from craving and torturing or indulging, but rather through understanding. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling gives rise to craving. Craving gives rise to clinging. Clinging gives rise to forms of existence. And with that comes birth. And once born, there's aging, sorrow, lamentation, all of those things come to be. So ending is we have to end the craving, and craving ends when this delusion of a sense of self is gone. Yeah. So in order to do that, we need to follow this noble eightfold path, having right view, right intention, speech, action, and livelihood, putting in the effort, building up the right mindfulness and deep meditation. And as the hindrances go down, you can see things for what they are clearly, and that is what brings about the insights. Of course, this is all just the map only. They're all very deep stuff. So, and in previous Dhamma talks, we have addressed some of them. And anything else that we haven't addressed, you can ask questions, or propose as topics if you want to know more in any area, and we can address those in the future topic Dhamma talks. So I think that's more than enough for today's Dhamma talk. And we invite you to unmute and ask questions, or you can put into the chat. Okay, so Nilakshi says, thank you. Oops, still getting used to the time difference. Okay. Yes, for the New Zealand people, it's quite late. It's like now 10:30 already. Thank you for being there. And Sandika says, Dear Venerable, in relation to the Buddha's definition of the middle path, i.e., not sensual world or asceticism, is it correct to say that we cannot fully practice the middle path or the noble eightfold path while living a lay life, given that lay life is rooted in the world of the sensual desire? What advice would you have for lay people? Okay, this will be a whole Dhamma talk to address fully, but the short answer is no, the Noble Eightfold Path is to be practiced by everybody. In the time of the Buddha, lay people too attained to various stages of enlightenment. They became stream winners, once returners, and non-returners. But the Buddha says, of course, if you get enlightened as a lay person, your desire to continue is not there. Therefore, you would pass away in 7 days or something like this, and you would become a monastic. I mean, by this time, anyway, you are living very much like a monastic. But the lay people or monastics, they both can practice. It is changing your right view and, having right view and changing your lifestyle and arranging it in a way. I believe I gave several Dhamma talks about Noble Eightfold Path and practical ways to, I think, practice in real life or something like this, where I spoke about with the simile of the snake story to bring up the day-to-day how to apply the Noble Eightfold Path, but we can talk about it again another time with other things. And maybe when Upekkha can also contribute your way of applying in a maybe next Thursday or something like this. But the short answer is no, you can. Yeah, and we will give you more tips on how to live it, and it is also to try and simplify. It is true that when you have to go to work, when you have a family, when you have social engagements, there are challenges. The way the Buddha said is like a lay person going through the path is like a peacock, the flight of a peacock, and a monastic, it's like a flight of a swan. So but you can. He didn't say you can't. Yeah, you can. It is possible, but you can clearly see there is a bit more hurdles, but it is possible. But also there are monastics who fly like peacocks too, right? Even though they have conducive conditions, sometimes you also get stuck in projects or doing all kinds of stuff and can go backwards as well. And we see sometimes some lay people actually really organize their lives and actually live quite well and make much progress. Yeah, so it depends. It is possible. Yeah, we'll talk about it as a whole Dhamma talk, I suppose. Yeah. Okay, who is Simran? Please unmute and speak.
Thank you, Venerable. My question is about, in regards to being a monastic, what I've noticed, like especially when trying to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, I feel that because I often consider like ordaining. I mean, I know that's like far for me, but I always think that. And then what I feel that is the biggest block in my mind is the idea that I've noticed it's very regimented sometimes where there's like, okay, in the monastery, they wake up at this time, eat at this time, etc. However, I feel like it's almost like sort of like this idea of being an ascetic, how they limit themselves in ways. When you're a monastic and you have to sort of like only eat at a certain time or sleep this much, that in a way could actually be working against the particular individual. And my question is, how would you then say that that's following the Noble Eightfold Path if you're doing something like maybe you stop eating at 12, oh, but then you're still hungry. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's actually working the opposite way.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, let me clarify that this is exactly what we said is not the Noble Eightfold Path, right? Amount of eating, amount of sleeping, what time you do is not what is Noble Eightfold Path. That's the gradual training, or that is how you find the conducive condition. Noble Eightfold Path is different. That's what the whole talk was about. Maybe re-listen again. But
No, I mean like
I get
to
your
like
point.
focus on the Eightfold Path.
Yeah. Even to focus on the Eightfold Path, you're talking about to get the depends on which monastery you are at. If you are at Santi Monastery, you have a lot of freedom. Our monasteries actually function differently. I don't know which monasteries you're talking about. Maybe there are some monastic traditions that are like that, but it's not quite like that. Of course, there has to be a time to eat, otherwise it's very bit complicated, especially if your alms would mendicants, but that's very simple. And there is also still evening allowables if you need a bit of sustenance, like some simple things to get a bit of energy if you didn't eat enough. So all of those things are taken care of when you know this. And there is a lot of freedom in our monasteries, for example. We have the flexibility to adjust how much work, how much meditation, how much study we do, depending on the individual. So this is how our monasteries are set up. So but it depends on each person. Yeah. So people have to know, and you're very right. So some people are not ready. It is also a sense of renunciation, because sometimes one of our biggest thing is wanting to control our life as well. Yeah. So that controller is a bit given up, encouraged to given up in monastic life. That is part of the renunciation. Yeah. So we adjust. After a while, you can adjust to those little things. Those things are quite simple, the eating times and stuff, but the sleep and amount of sleep, all those are not in our monasteries. There is no bell that goes where everybody has to wake up at this time and everybody has to come out and everybody has to sit. It's not like that. And it is not how it was at the time of the Buddha either. So, so that's that. So the flexibility is there, but of course, different individual works differently. For some people, having a little bit of that organization is helpful. These are the people who are not very self-disciplined. Yeah. So for them, having a bit of group activity, having a time to do things is actually helpful for their temperament. So then those people can go to a monastery which has that kind of routine. And others have a good discipline and they are able to take care and do what is needed themselves, then they can find a monastery that suits them. So there's a variety of monastery. Not every monastery is like that because it is not possible otherwise for everybody to work like that. Then, of course, you would go backwards. But that's not the real problem in monastic life. It is having to live with a large group of people who you can't choose. Yeah. You will be living with all kinds of people together in communal life. Now, that would be the real challenge. But that is helpful. Yeah, that is actually providing incredible opportunities to grow, to understand, to cultivate the path if you have the right attitude. If you don't have the right attitude, again, you would be going backwards. It's true. So, monastic life provides certain conducive conditions, but depends on where the individual is at. So people try it out. For some people, yes, it's right. Some people, they're not there yet. So it depends on which monastery, the community, how the practice is going. That's what, isn't it? What would you like to add for this?
And sometimes it changes as well.
Yeah, it changes. Exactly. It changes. So we have to be able to, it's part of the practice. This is where it is conducive condition in a way. However, living with a group of people who have a similar goal and have that conducive environment is actually also very helpful sometimes. So it depends on what individuals need. Some individuals, they don't need that. Or you can go and stay in monasteries from time to time, and then you can practice on your own. So each individual, it depends. So you can try out. It's available, and there are big monasteries, there are medium-sized monasteries, there's a small-sized monasteries. So, so we had to find what works for us. Even for myself, I didn't straight away go and ordained in the monastery that was nearest to me because I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel, somehow the conditions were right for me. So I waited, and when things were right, only things started to happen. And this is very important. If you just push through and go and end up in the wrong place, yes, monastic life can take you in the wrong direction, just like you mentioned. Yeah, your defilements will be growing, your noble eightfold path will not be happening. Yeah, it's a good point to consider. Yeah.